Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of New Haven Colony, watching the orange sky grow darker by the hour. The massive solar storm was coming, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The atmospheric processors that kept their world breathable were already starting to fail. Administrator Chen, "We've sent the distress signal on all frequencies," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communication center. His voice carried the weight of their desperate situation. "The message has reached at least 12 different star systems." Sarah nodded but kept her eyes on the horizon. 2.3 million people lived on New Haven. Men, women, children who had traveled across the galaxy to build a new life on this distant world. They had worked for 20 years to make this planet their home. Now it might all end because of a solar storm they couldn't predict or prevent. The storm would strip away their atmosphere in less than 48 hours. Without the processors working, everyone would suffocate. They had evacuation ships, but not nearly enough for everyone. At best, they could save maybe 100,000 people. The rest would die. "Any responses to our call?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer from Rodriguez's expression. "Nothing yet, Administrator, but the signals are definitely reaching the Galactic Concordat. Our quantum transmitters are working perfectly." Sarah allowed herself a moment of hope. The Galactic Concordat was the most powerful alliance in known space. They had technology that could easily save New Haven, atmospheric generators that could replace their failing processors, ships that could evacuate everyone to safety. They had helped other worlds before. Humanity had been trying to join the Concordat for 30 years. Earth's diplomats worked constantly to prove that humans deserved a place among the galactic community. This could be their chance to show they were worthy allies. Far away on Zentara Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Concordat, Ambassador Veltar received the human distress signal. The crystalline being's form shimmered with annoyance as the message played in the emergency council chamber. "Honored Council," the human voice pleaded through the speakers. "This is Administrator Sarah Chen of New Haven Colony. We face total atmospheric collapse in 46 hours. 2.3 million lives are at stake. We request immediate assistance. We can offer payment, resources, anything you need. Please help us." The council chamber fell silent. 12 different alien species sat around the great circular table, representing the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. To them, the human plea was nothing more than background noise. "Deathworlders," muttered Council Member Xi, a tall blue humanoid with 4 arms. "They chose to live on that dangerous planet. Natural selection will take its course." Ambassador Veltar's crystalline body pulsed with agreement. "The humans come from a world of constant disasters. Earthquakes, storms, volcanic eruptions. They should know better than to settle on unstable worlds. They're violent by nature," added another council member. "Their own history shows thousands of wars. Perhaps it's better if fewer of them survive to spread their aggressive tendencies." The debate, if it could be called that, lasted only minutes. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Concordat would not respond to Earth's distress call. The humans would have to solve their own problems. Back on New Haven, Sarah waited for a response that would never come. Hour after hour passed. The solar storm grew stronger. The atmospheric processors failed one by one. The orange sky turned red, then purple, then an ominous black. "Administrator," Rodriguez called out, his voice breaking. "I'm picking up Concordat communications. They received our signal. They're discussing trade routes through our sector." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Trade routes? They're talking about how convenient it will be when we're gone. The shipping lanes will be clearer." The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Concordat had heard their plea. They simply didn't care. To them, the deaths of 2.3 million humans was nothing more than a minor convenience for future business. She activated the colony-wide communication system. Her voice reached every home, every workplace, every shelter on New Haven. "Citizens of New Haven, this is Administrator Chen. I need to tell you the truth about our situation." She explained everything: the failing processors, the approaching storm, the evacuation ships that could only save a fraction of their population, and most importantly, the Galactic Concordat's response to their distress call. "They heard us," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. "They chose to let us die. We are alone out here. We have always been alone." The colony erupted in panic, then anger, then a strange kind of determination. Families held each other closer. Engineers worked desperately to extend the life of the failing processors. Emergency teams organized the evacuation of children and pregnant women first. Dr. James Wright, the colony's chief scientist, approached Sarah in the command center. "Administrator, I've managed to establish a quantum link with Earth. We can transmit our final messages before the storm hits us completely." Sarah nodded. Earth needed to know what happened here. More importantly, Earth needed to know how the galaxy really saw humanity. She stood before the transmission device, knowing that billions of people on Earth would see this message. Behind her, through the observation windows, the storm was visible as a wall of deadly radiation approaching their world. "People of Earth," Sarah began, "this is Administrator Sarah Chen of New Haven Colony. In approximately 6 hours, our world will become uninhabitable. We have requested help from the Galactic Concordat. They received our transmission. They debated our request. They chose to ignore us." She paused, watching the storm grow closer. "They call us Deathworlders. They think we're violent and primitive. To them, we are nothing more than obstacles to be removed when convenient. Today, they proved that our lives mean nothing to them." The transmission flickered as the storm's radiation began interfering with their equipment. Sarah spoke faster, knowing she had little time left. "We came to the stars with hope. We believed we could find friends among the stars. We were wrong. The galaxy is not full of allies waiting to welcome us. It is full of beings who see us as expendable." Behind her, the first wave of radiation hit the outer atmospheric processors. Alarms began blaring throughout the colony. People were running to the emergency shelters, though everyone knew they would only delay the inevitable. "Remember us?" Sarah said into the transmission. "Remember New Haven. Remember that when we needed help, when children were dying, when families were crying out for salvation, the galaxy turned its back on us. Remember that they heard our voices and chose silence." The transmission cut out as the storm reached the colony's main communication array. Sarah watched through the observation windows as the atmospheric processors finally failed completely. The sky above New Haven began to glow with deadly radiation. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, studying to become a diplomat. Sarah had encouraged her to pursue peace with the alien civilizations. Now she hoped her daughter would choose a different path. As the colony's emergency systems failed one by one, Sarah sent one final message on the short-range transmitters. It reached the evacuation ships just before they jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying the survivors back to Earth. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them how we died. Tell them that the galaxy's silence was louder than any weapon. And tell them that someday, somehow, we must make sure this never happens to anyone again." The storm consumed New Haven Colony completely. 2.3 million people died while the Galactic Concordat discussed trade routes. The galaxy continued spinning, indifferent to human suffering. But on Earth, billions of people received Sarah Chen's final message. They learned that their hopes for galactic friendship were naive dreams. They discovered that among the stars, strength was the only language that mattered. The morning had begun. Soon the fury would follow. President Elena Vasquez stood before the memorial wall in Geneva, where the names of every person who died on New Haven were carved in black stone. 2.3 million names covered the massive structure. Children's names next to their parents. Families who had dreamed of a new life among the stars, only to find death in the vacuum of space. The world mourned for 3 months. Every television channel, every news feed, every social media platform carried the same message. The galaxy had heard humanity's cry for help and chosen to remain silent. The Galactic Concordat, with all their advanced technology and vast resources, had watched human children die and felt nothing. Elena touched one name on the wall, Sarah Chen, Administrator of New Haven Colony. The woman who had sent humanity's final message from a dying world. Her words played constantly on Earth's networks. "Remember that they heard our voices and chose silence." "Madam President," came a voice behind her. Elena turned to see Admiral Marcus Kane, head of Earth's colonial defense forces. The old soldier's face was carved from granite, his eyes holding a cold fury that had burned for months since New Haven's destruction. "Admiral Kane, have you prepared your proposal for the Defense Council?" Kane nodded, his jaw tight. "Project Ragnarok is ready for presentation, but I need to know if you're truly prepared for what this means. What I'm suggesting will change humanity forever." Elena looked back at the memorial wall. "Admiral, they let our children die. They let families suffocate in the darkness while they discuss trade routes. How exactly do you think this should change us?" into something they'll never ignore again. The Earth Defense Council met in an underground facility beneath the Swiss Alps. Representatives from every nation sat around a circular table, their faces grim. For 30 years they had pursued peaceful contact with alien civilizations. They had sent diplomats, scientists, and gifts to prove humanity's worthiness. All of that effort had meant nothing when New Haven needed help. Admiral Kane activated the holographic display at the center of the table. Images of massive ships appeared, their designs unlike anything humanity had ever built before. These were not exploration vessels or peaceful traders. They were weapons of war designed with one purpose: to make the galaxy fear humanity. Honorable Council, Kane began. For 3 decades, we have begged for acceptance. We have tried to prove we deserve a place among the galactic community. New Haven proved that our efforts were wasted. The galaxy doesn't respect peaceful species. It only understands strength. The ship designs rotated slowly in the hologram. Dreadnought-class vessels equipped with kinetic bombardment systems, carrier ships that could deploy swarms of fighter craft, and at the center, a massive flagship designed to command fear across star systems. Project Ragnarok will give us the fleet we should have built 30 years ago. We will weaponize our reputation as Deathworlders. If they think we're violent and primitive, we'll show them exactly how destructive primitive violence can be. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, Earth's chief scientist, raised her hand. Admiral, the cost of building this fleet would be enormous. We're talking about redirecting our entire industrial capacity for years. The cost of not building it is another New Haven, Kane replied coldly. The cost is watching more human children die while aliens discuss trade routes. President Vasquez leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? Kane's expression didn't change. Total war doctrine. Not conquest, not occupation. Complete annihilation of any species that threatens human life. We become the galaxy's apex predator, so feared that no one will ever again ignore a human distress call. The council chamber fell silent. Representatives looked at each other, weighing the magnitude of Kane's proposal. This wasn't just about building ships. This was about transforming humanity's entire relationship with the galaxy. They call us Deathworlders because Earth is dangerous, Kane continued. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, ice ages. We survived all of it. We evolved in constant danger. While other species developed on peaceful worlds with stable climates, we learned to fight for every day of life. He gestured to the ship designs. These vessels incorporate everything that makes us dangerous. Kinetic weapons that turn asteroids into planet killers. Radiation bombs designed by scientists who understand nuclear warfare. Ship designs based on predator behavior patterns. We'll give them exactly what they expect from Deathworlders. The Chinese representative spoke up. Admiral, what about diplomacy? Surely some species might be willing to help if we approach them differently. Kane's laugh was bitter. Madam Ambassador, we sent the most polite, desperate plea in galactic history. We offered payment, resources, anything they wanted. They ignored us completely. Diplomacy failed the moment they chose silence over saving children. President Vasquez stood up. All in favor of Project Ragnarok? The vote was unanimous. Every nation on Earth approved the construction of humanity's war fleet. The age of peaceful exploration was over. The age of human dominance would begin. Across Earth, the largest industrial mobilization in human history began. Shipyards that had built cargo vessels and exploration ships retooled for military production. Mining operations expanded to provide resources for weapons manufacturing. Scientists who had spent their careers seeking peaceful contact with aliens now designed instruments of war. The flagship would be named Remember New Haven. Its primary weapon system could crack moons and turn the debris into kinetic bombardment rounds. Its armor incorporated materials learned from Earth's most violent geological processes. Its crew quarters were designed for extended combat operations in deep space. Admiral Kane oversaw every detail personally. He insisted that each ship carry recordings of Sarah Chen's final transmission. Every human warrior would remember why they fought. Every weapon fired would honor the dead of New Haven. Meanwhile, intelligence reports from humanity's remaining diplomatic stations brought news from Concordat space. The Alien Alliance was completely unaware of Earth's industrial mobilization. They assumed humans were mourning their losses and would eventually return to begging for acceptance. Ambassador. Feltar had even published an academic paper. about the natural selection event on New Haven, the crystalline, being described humanity's losses as evidence that Deathworlders were unsuitable for galactic civilization. The paper was widely read and praised throughout Concordate space. Dr. Michael Torres, Earth's former ambassador to the Concordate, read Veltar's paper in his office on Luna Station. The diplomat who had spent 15 years trying to build bridges with alien civilizations felt something cold and final settle in his heart. He sent his resignation to President Vasquez with a single line. "I was wrong about everything." Build the fleet. 3 years passed. Earth's shipyards worked without stopping. The Remember New Haven took shape in orbital construction facilities, its massive bulk visible from Earth's surface. Smaller vessels joined the fleet daily: destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and support ships. The fleet's design philosophy was simple: overwhelming, inescapable destruction. These ships weren't built to explore or trade. They were built to ensure that no human distress call would ever be ignored again. As the construction neared completion, Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of Remember New Haven for the first time. The command center was stark and functional, with no decorations except a single memorial plaque listing every person who died on New Haven. "Admiral," reported Captain Williams, his second in command, "all ships report ready for operational deployment. The fleet is prepared for its first mission." Kane nodded, looking out at the stars through the bridge's observation windows. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Concordate continued their peaceful existence, completely unaware that humanity had spent 3 years preparing for war. "Contact President Vasquez," Kane ordered. "Tell her the Terran war fleet is ready to remind the galaxy that human lives matter." The age of begging was over. The age of demanding had begun. Soon the galaxy would learn that ignoring Earth's children came with a price too terrible to imagine. But first, they needed to find a target, someone who had participated in the decision to let New Haven die, someone who represented everything the Concordate stood for. Kane smiled grimly as intelligence reports identified the perfect first lesson. The Velkari Empire, a Concordate member species, had recently enslaved a human trading post on the edge of their territory. They expected the usual human response: diplomatic protests and economic sanctions. They were about to learn how badly they had misunderstood their new enemy. The Velkari Empire had existed for over 2,000 years without facing a real threat. Their blue-skinned, militaristic society controlled 12 star systems and considered themselves the Concordate's premier warrior race. When they enslaved the human trading post at Kepler Station, they expected the usual response from Earth: angry diplomatic messages and trade sanctions. Emperor Kethvar received Earth's first communication while lounging in his crystal palace on the Velkari homeworld. The message was simple and direct: release our people immediately, or face the consequences. The Emperor's laughter echoed through his throne room. Consequences? From the pathetic Deathworlders? Send a response telling them we'll consider releasing their people in exchange for a formal apology for their impertinence. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected something approaching the outer edge of the Velkari system. The readings were impossible to believe. Hundreds of ships, all human in design, all broadcasting the same identification. Terran war fleet. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of Remember New Haven, watching the Velkari homeworld grow larger on the main screen. Around his flagship, the entire human fleet maintained perfect formation. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and support vessels, over 300 ships in total. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh, his communications officer, "the Velkari are demanding to know our intentions. They're saying we've violated their territorial space." Kane's expression didn't change. "Open a channel to their Emperor. All frequencies." The main screen shifted to show Emperor Kethvar in his throne room, surrounded by military advisors. The alien leader's face showed confusion and growing anger. "Human fleet, you will explain your presence in our system immediately. You have no authority here." Kane stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "Emperor Kethvar, I am Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran war fleet. You are holding 73 human civilians in slavery. You will release them immediately. Or what?" Kethvar sneered. "You'll file another complaint with the Concordate? We are members in good standing. You are nothing but violent primitives who couldn't even save your own colony." The bridge of Remember New Haven fell silent. Every human officer remembered New Haven, Every one of them had sworn to ensure it never happened again. Kane's voice remained calm. "Emperor, you have 1 hour to release our people. After that, we will demonstrate why the galaxy should fear Deathworlders." Kethavar's laughter was broadcast across the entire system. 1 hour? Primitive fool. Our fleet will destroy your pathetic ships before you can fire a single shot. We are the Velkari Empire. We have never known defeat. The transmission ended. Kane turned to his weapons officer. "Commander Park, target the 3 moons orbiting their homeworld. Prepare kinetic bombardment systems. Sir, those moons have mining colonies. Approximately 50,000 Velkari civilians." Kane's eyes hardened. They had 1 hour to release our people. Instead, they chose to insult our dead. Fire when ready. The Remember New Haven's main weapons powered up. Massive kinetic accelerators launched tungsten rods at relativistic speeds toward the Velkari moons. The projectiles struck with the force of nuclear weapons, but this was only the beginning. The fleet's engineering ships deployed gravitic charges around each moon. When the charges detonated, they destabilized the moon's orbital patterns. Within minutes, all 3 moons began fragmenting. Their debris pulled toward the Velkari homeworld by carefully calculated gravitational fields. Emperor Kethavar watched in horror from his palace as his world's night sky filled with falling debris. Chunks of moon, some as large as buildings, began impacting the planet's surface. His military advisors scrambled to coordinate defensive measures, but nothing could stop the rain of destruction. "Contact the human fleet," Kethavar screamed. "Tell them we surrender. We'll release their people immediately." The communication reached Remember New Haven within minutes. Admiral Kane listened to the surrender offer without expression, then gave his response. "Surrender is no longer accepted. You had your chance for mercy 3 years ago when New Haven sent its distress call. The Velkari fleet, over 200 ships strong, moved to intercept the human vessels. Their technology was advanced, their weapons powerful, their crews experienced in combat. They should have been more than a match for the primitive Deathworlders. They weren't prepared for humanity's approach to warfare. The human ships didn't engage in traditional space combat. Instead, they used the fragmenting moons as weapons. Tractor beams grabbed chunks of debris and hurled them at Velkari vessels. Kinetic rounds punched through alien shields like paper. Most shocking of all, the humans used captured enemy ships as projectiles, ramming them into other vessels at impossible speeds. Captain Zarketh of the Velkari flagship watched his fleet being systematically destroyed. These weren't the tactics of a civilized species. The humans fought like wild animals, using everything around them as weapons. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "they're not trying to capture our ships. They're not taking prisoners. They're just destroying everything." Zarketh understood. This wasn't a battle for territory or resources. This was extermination. The human fleet's efficiency was terrifying. Within 6 hours, the entire Velkari military was either destroyed or disabled. The orbital defense platforms were gone. The shipyards were burning wreckage. The proud empire that had never known defeat was helpless. Admiral Kane opened a communication channel to the planet's surface. His voice reached every Velkari on the homeworld. "People of the Velkari Empire, you enslaved our citizens. You insulted our dead. You laughed at our threats. This is the consequence of underestimating Deathworlders." The orbital bombardment began at dawn. Kinetic rounds struck military installations, government buildings, and industrial centers. The humans showed no interest in occupying territory or capturing resources. They simply erased everything that represented Velkari power. Emperor Kethavar made one final desperate plea. "Please, we'll release your people. We'll pay reparations. We'll do anything you demand." Kane's response was broadcast across the entire galaxy. 3 years ago, children were dying on New Haven, while you debated whether to help them. You chose silence. Today I offer you the same courtesy you showed our families. The bombardment continued for 3 days. When it ended, the Velkari homeworld was a wasteland. The empire that had existed for 2 millennia was gone. The 73 human prisoners were rescued from the ruins of Kepler Station and taken to safety. But the Terran war fleet wasn't finished. Intelligence reports identified 12 other systems, where Concordat members had participated in the decision to ignore New Haven's distress call. Each would receive the same lesson. News of the Velkari Empire's destruction spread across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. The Galactic Concordat Emergency Council met in emergency session on Zentara Prime. Ambassador Veltar, who had originally dismissed New Haven's plea, stood before his fellow council members with crystalline form flickering in fear. "Honored colleagues," Veltar said, his voice shaking. "We may have made an error in judgment regarding the humans." Their response to the Velkari situation was disproportionate. Council member Zexai pulled up tactical reports on the holographic display. They used moons as weapons. They turned debris into kinetic bombardment rounds. This isn't the behavior of a civilized species. "That's exactly the point," replied another council member. "We called them Deathworlders and primitives. We forgot that primitives can be extremely dangerous when they're angry." The reports continued to arrive. Human fleets were moving toward other concordate systems. They weren't interested in negotiation or diplomacy. They were systematically hunting down every species that had voted to ignore New Haven's distress call. Ambassador Veltar reviewed the original recordings of New Haven's plea. Sarah Chen's desperate voice echoed through the council chamber. "We can offer payment, resources, anything you need. Please help us." For the first time, Veltar understood what they had done. They hadn't just ignored a distress call. They had condemned millions of innocents to death while treating it as a minor inconvenience. "We need to contact the human fleet," Veltar said. "We need to explain that our decision was based on policy, not malice." "You think they care about our policies?" Council member Zexai laughed bitterly. "They just destroyed a 2,000-year-old empire in 3 days. They're not interested in explanations." The truth was becoming clear to the entire concordate. They had awakened something terrible. The galaxy's most dangerous species had decided to stop asking for acceptance and start demanding respect. Admiral Kane received regular reports from his fleet commanders. System after system fell to human forces. The pattern was always the same: an ultimatum, a refusal, then complete annihilation. The galaxy was learning a simple lesson. Human distress calls would never again be ignored, because anyone capable of ignoring them would no longer exist. Standing on the bridge of Remember New Haven, Kane looked out at the stars and thought about Sarah Chen's final words. The colony administrator had asked Earth to remember New Haven. Kane had done more than remember. He had made sure the galaxy would never forget. The emergency session on Zentara Prime had been going for 18 hours without a break. The Galactic Concordate's greatest minds struggled to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. In less than 6 months, the human war fleet had destroyed 8 member civilizations completely. Ambassador Veltar stood before the holographic display showing the current tactical situation. Red markers indicated human fleet positions throughout concordate space. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The humans were systematically hunting down every species that had voted to ignore New Haven's distress call. "Honored Council," Veltar said, his crystalline form dim with exhaustion. "The humans have rejected every attempt at communication. They won't accept surrenders. They don't take prisoners. They simply arrive, demand total submission, and then destroy everything when that submission is refused." Council member Zexai activated another display showing casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. Entire species had been reduced to scattered refugee populations hiding in the galactic rim. Ancient civilizations with histories spanning millennia had been erased in days. "How is this possible?" demanded Senator Carthine of the Hegemony Worlds. "Our combined fleets should be able to stop these primitive Deathworlders. They're using crude kinetic weapons against our energy shields." "That's exactly the problem," replied Admiral Kress of the Concordate Defense Force. "Our technology is designed for civilized warfare. We use precision energy weapons to disable enemy ships and minimize casualties. The humans don't care about being civilized. They use everything as a weapon." The tactical display showed footage from the Battle of Zerion, where human forces had destabilized a gas giant's core and used the explosion to destroy an entire fleet. Similar recordings showed humans using asteroid fields as kinetic bombardment systems, turning captured ships into guided missiles, and weaponizing space debris. "They fight like their homeworld taught them," Admiral Kress continued. "Earth is a death trap that kills its own inhabitants regularly. Earthquakes, storms, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts. They evolved to survive constant disasters. Now they're treating space warfare like another natural disaster to overcome." Council member Zexai pulled up psychological profiles of human leaders. "Look at their commander, this Admiral Kane. He lost family members on New Haven. To him, this isn't war, it's justice. He genuinely believes the galaxy deserves to burn for ignoring their distress call. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. The Concordate's policy of dismissing human concerns had created an enemy that couldn't be negotiated with, couldn't be intimidated, and apparently couldn't be defeated. "What about our allies?" asked Senator Carthine. "Surely some of the younger species would help us against this threat?" Veltar's form flickered with what might have been embarrassment. "Actually, honored Senator, that's our other problem. Many of the younger species are not helping us." The holographic display changed to show intelligence reports from across Concordate space. Dozens of civilizations, mostly those that had been dominated by the older, more established species, were refusing to assist in the defense against humanity. The Alteran Republic sent a message saying they understand human anger and cannot oppose justified retribution, Veltar read from the reports. The Centauri Federation declared neutrality, stating that the Concordate must face the consequences of its callous policies. Even worse, 3 systems have formally declared their intention to surrender to human forces and request protection. This revelation sent shockwaves through the council chamber. The Concordate was fracturing from within. Species that had been suppressed or ignored by the ruling council for centuries saw humanity's rampage as an opportunity for liberation. Admiral Kress activated his personal communicator. "Central Command, give me a status report on our defensive preparations." The response was not encouraging. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the Third Fleet at Sigma Draconis. Long-range sensors show debris fields where our ships should be. The humans are moving toward the core systems faster than our intelligence predicted. How long until they reach Zentara Prime?" "At their current pace, perhaps 2 weeks, sir." The council chamber erupted in panic. Zentara Prime was the heart of Concordate civilization, home to over 4 billion beings from dozens of species. It was supposed to be the most heavily defended system in known space. "We need to contact Earth directly," declared Senator Carthine. "Surely their government can control their military forces. This Admiral Kane must answer to someone." Veltar had already tried that approach. "I sent a direct communication to President Vasquez last week." Her response was instructive. The president's message played on the chamber's speakers. Elena Vasquez's voice was calm, but filled with cold determination. "Ambassador Veltar, 3 years ago you had the opportunity to show mercy to dying children. You chose indifference. Admiral Kane's actions have my full support and the backing of every human government. You will receive exactly the same consideration you showed New Haven." The message continued. "However, I will offer you something you never offered us. A choice. Any species that formally acknowledges their guilt in New Haven's destruction and makes genuine reparations to the victims' families will be spared. All others will face the consequences of their callous disregard for human life." The terms were simple, but devastating. The proud civilizations of the Concordate would have to publicly admit they had condemned innocents to death and pay tribute to their former victims. For species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, such submission was unthinkable. "We cannot accept those terms," declared Council Member Zexai. "To admit guilt would destroy our authority throughout the galaxy. Better to fight and maintain our dignity." "Dignity?" Veltar's crystalline form flared with anger. "Look around you. Half our fleets are destroyed. Ancient civilizations are extinct. What dignity is there in clinging to pride while our worlds burn?" The debate raged for hours. Some council members advocated for total war against humanity, mobilizing every resource in Concordate space. Others pushed for immediate surrender, hoping to preserve what they could of their civilizations. A few suggested fleeing to other galaxies entirely. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its relentless advance. Each victory brought them closer to the Concordate's core systems. Each destroyed world sent the same message: human lives mattered, and those who forgot that lesson would not survive to make the same mistake twice. On the bridge of Remember New Haven, Admiral Kane reviewed intelligence reports from Concordate space. The enemy was fracturing exactly as he had hoped. Fear was dividing their alliance more effectively than any weapon. "Admiral," reported Captain Williams, We're receiving surrender offers from 17 different systems. They're requesting terms. Kane's expression didn't change. Standard terms. Full acknowledgement of guilt in New Haven's destruction. Reparations to victim families. Complete disarmament of military forces. Acceptance of human oversight for all future government decisions. Sir, some of them are claiming they voted against ignoring the distress call. They say they were overruled by the senior council members. Then they should have acted anyway. Orders don't excuse moral cowardice. Kane's voice carried the weight of 3 years of grief and anger. They had the power to help dying children and chose not to use it. Being overruled is not absolution. The fleet's next target was the Hegemony Worlds, a collection of 5 systems that had actively mocked New Haven's distress call. Their leader, Senator Carthene, had published articles describing the colony's destruction as natural selection in action. Kane looked forward to teaching the senator about natural selection. As the human fleet approached the hegemony systems, long-range sensors detected something unexpected. The local population was in open revolt against their government. Civilian. Ships were fleeing the inner worlds while military forces fought each other in orbit. Captain Williams, what's your assessment of the situation? It appears the civilian population has learned about our approach, sir. They're demanding their government surrender immediately. The military is split between loyalists and those who want to avoid annihilation. Kane allowed himself a small smile. Fear was indeed a powerful teacher. The galaxy was learning that supporting policies that led to human deaths carried a price too high to pay. But the lesson wasn't complete yet. Until every world in Concordat, space understood that human distress calls were sacred, the fleet would continue its work. Sarah Chen and the people of New Haven would not be forgotten. The galaxy had chosen to ignore humanity's pleas for help. Now humanity was choosing to ignore their pleas for mercy. The symmetry was perfect, and Admiral Kane intended to see it through to its inevitable conclusion. Zentara Prime grew larger on the tactical displays. Soon the Concordat's capital would face the same choice every other world had received: submit or burn. Kane suspected he knew which option they would choose. It didn't matter. Either way, the galaxy would never again dismiss the value of human life. Zentara Prime had never been under siege before. The capital world of the Galactic Concordat was supposed to be unconquerable, protected by the largest fleet in known space and defended by technology that had kept peace for over 1,000 years. That peace ended when the Terran war fleet arrived at the edge of the system. Admiral Marcus. Kane stood on the bridge of Remember New Haven, studying the massive orbital installations surrounding Zentara Prime. Defense platforms larger than cities, shipyards that could build fleets, weapon systems designed to destroy entire armadas. All of it was about to become debris. Admiral, reported Captain Williams, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. It's Ambassador Veltar. The main screen showed the crystalline being who had originally dismissed New Haven's distress call. Veltar's form was dim, flickering with what appeared to be fear and desperation. Admiral Kane, Veltar began. I am Ambassador Veltar of the Galactic Concordat. We wish to discuss terms for ending this conflict. Kane's expression remained cold. There are no terms, Ambassador. There is only justice for New Haven. Please, Veltar's voice cracked. We acknowledge our mistakes. We were wrong to ignore your distress call. We are prepared to make reparations, to formally apologize, to change our policies. Surely that's enough. Tell me, Ambassador, Kane replied. When Sarah Chen begged you to save her people, what was your response? Veltar's form flickered more rapidly. We voted to maintain non-interference policy. Your exact words, Ambassador. I have the recordings. There was a long pause before Veltar spoke again. I said that natural selection would take its course. I called humans violent Deathworlders who should know better than to settle on dangerous worlds. And now you want mercy? Kane's laugh was bitter. You condemned 2.3 million innocents to death because you thought they were beneath your notice. Today, I offer you the same consideration you showed dying children. The transmission ended. Kane turned to his fleet commanders. Begin bombardment of the orbital defenses. I want a clear path to the planet's surface. The Battle of Zentara Prime began with humanity's signature tactic: overwhelming kinetic force. Tungsten rods accelerated to near light speed punched through energy shields as if they didn't exist. Defense platforms that had stood for centuries crumbled under the assault, but something unexpected happened as the human fleet advanced. Ships began emerging from behind Zentara Prime's moons, not Concordat vessels, but ships from the younger species that had been dominated by the senior council members. Admiral, Captain Williams reported, "We're being hailed by the Alteran Republic fleet. They're requesting permission to assist in the attack." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Assist us?" The Alteran commander appeared on screen, a tall, blue-skinned humanoid with earnest eyes. "Admiral Kane, I am Commander Lithara of the Alteran Republic. We formally request to join your assault on the Concordat leadership." "Why would you attack your own alliance?" "Because it was never our alliance," Lithara replied firmly. "For 300 years, the senior species have treated us as subjects, not equals. When New Haven sent its distress call, many of us wanted to help. We were forbidden to act by Concordat law. Today, we choose to act according to our conscience instead of their orders." More ships appeared, vessels from the Centauri Federation, the Tau Collective, the Rigel Commonwealth. Dozens of civilizations that had been suppressed by the older, more arrogant species were joining humanity's assault on Zentara Prime. Kane found himself facing an unexpected decision. His mission was to punish those responsible for New Haven's destruction, not to conquer the galaxy. These younger species claimed they had wanted to help but were prevented by Concordat policy. "Commander Lithara," Kane said, "prove your sincerity. Provide us with detailed intelligence on Zentara Prime's defenses and the location of every council member who voted to ignore New Haven's distress call." The intelligence arrived within minutes. Detailed schematics of the planet's defenses, personal schedules of council members, even security codes for the government district. The younger species had been planning this rebellion for years, waiting for the right moment to overthrow their oppressors. Kane studied the information, then made his decision. "All allied vessels, you may assist in disabling the orbital defenses. However, the final judgment of the council members responsible for New Haven belongs to humanity alone." The combined fleet made short work of Zentara Prime's defenses. The mighty orbital platforms were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The shipyards that had built the Concordat's fleets became twisted metal sculptures floating in space. As human forces prepared to land on the planet, Kane received an unexpected transmission from Earth. President Vasquez appeared on screen, now visibly aged by 3 years of war and grief. "Admiral Kane," she said, "I've been monitoring your progress. The situation at Zentara Prime presents us with an opportunity we didn't expect. Madam President, the galaxy is fracturing along lines we never anticipated. The younger species are rebelling against their former oppressors. If we handle this correctly, we can create a new galactic order based on mutual respect rather than domination." Kane considered her words. "What are you suggesting?" "Justice for New Haven is non-negotiable. Those responsible must face consequences. But perhaps we can build something better from the ashes of the Concordat, something that ensures no distress call is ever ignored again." The landing on Zentara Prime proceeded without resistance. The planet's population had already risen in revolt against the Concordat leadership. Council members who had once ruled the galaxy found themselves barricaded in government buildings, abandoned by their own security forces. Ambassador Veltar was captured in his crystalline spire, surrounded by the recordings of his dismissive statements about New Haven. When human Marines brought him before Admiral Kane, the alien's form was dim with despair. "Ambassador," Kane said, "you wanted to discuss terms. Here are mine. You will stand trial for crimes against sentience. Every council member who voted to ignore New Haven's distress call will face judgment. Your assets will be liquidated to provide reparations to the victims' families. And if we refuse," Kane's smile was cold, "then you'll share the fate of the Velkari Empire." The trials lasted for months. One by one, the council members who had dismissed human suffering were brought before an interstellar court. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy, ensuring that every civilization understood the price of callous indifference. Some council members showed genuine remorse. They were sentenced to decades of community service, helping to rebuild worlds damaged by Concordat policies. Others, like Veltar, remained defiant to the end. They faced the same fate as the civilizations they had condemned: extinction. But the most significant outcome was the formation of the Terran hegemony. Species that had genuinely opposed the Concordat's decision to ignore New Haven were invited to join a new alliance based on simple principles. Distress calls were sacred, the strong protected the weak, and every sentient life had value. Admiral Kane, now aged by years of war, stood before the memorial to New Haven that had been erected on Zentara Prime. The names of every person who died were carved in stone, surrounded by representatives from dozens of worlds who had pledged to ensure such a tragedy never happened again. Sarah Chen, Kane said, reading the colony administrator's name on the memorial. I promised you would not be forgotten. I promised the galaxy would learn to value human life. Today that promise is fulfilled. President Vasquez, now in her 70s, joined him at the memorial. Admiral, the galaxy has changed because of what you did here. No species will ever again ignore a distress call. Kane nodded, but his expression remained somber. The price was high, Madam President. Entire civilizations extinct, billions dead. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah Chen would approve of what we did in her name. Admiral, do you remember her final words? Kane closed his eyes, reciting from memory. Tell them that someday, somehow, we must make sure this never happens to anyone again. That's exactly what you did, Vasquez said firmly. You made sure no other colony will face New Haven's fate. No other children will die while the galaxy discusses trade routes. As they stood in silence, representatives from the hegemony's member species approached the memorial. Former enemies and new allies, all united by the understanding that ignoring suffering was no longer an option. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Human distress calls were now sacred throughout known space. The price of ignoring them had been demonstrated so thoroughly that no one would dare repeat the Concordate's mistake. Admiral Kane remained at the memorial long after the others left. He thought about Sarah Chen's daughter, now a senior officer in the hegemony fleet. He thought about the children who would grow up in a galaxy where help always came when needed. He thought about the price of that security. Rest in peace, he whispered to the names on the memorial. Your deaths were not in vain. The galaxy remembers New Haven. The galaxy will never forget. Above them, ships from dozens of worlds patrolled the space lanes, their crews sworn to answer any distress call regardless of species or politics. The age of callous indifference was over. The age of universal compassion had begun, built on the ashes of those who thought human lives didn't matter.